Hey, it's Dr. Amanda with StraightSmile Solutions, StraightSmileSolutions.com. And wow, there's a lot going on here in this picture. And this isn't necessarily something I'd recommend. I just realized I have this picture. But no, the topic today is which should we do, mandible molar tubes or like this, in braces, or bands in braces. And that's a really personal decision. I'll kind of tell you the way my thinking has evolved over the years and where I am with it. Also, it's going to depend on the standard of care in your own state, your own country. I'll tell you standard of care where I am. And, you got to think about if something went wrong and if a dental board or something like that or insurance company audited you, did you do the right thing? So, way back when, bands had been around for, I don't know, hundreds of years, 100 years, I don't know, ever since braces started, earlier in the 20th century. Um, there was no way, everything was a band. Earlier, 1970s and earlier, you had bands on your front teeth, you had bands on your premolars. Um, it was a whole bunch of giant bands, very uncomfortable. A lot of spacers. That was the only way that they could move teeth, right? Was to wrap metal fully around them. Later in the 80s and 90s, they were able to start coming up with brackets, but they really didn't have the molar tubes figured out yet. They only had the anterior brackets figured out. I think when I had braces back in the early 90s, it might have been 90, 91, I had bands on my premolars and molars, but I had brackets on my front teeth, if I remember correctly. So, benefits of bands is that they're less likely to break. Okay, that's the only benefit. Everything else is a negative. Um, Personally, I really don't have that much trouble with molar brackets. Obviously, you don't want to get super slim ones. You want to get some pretty chunky ones so they stick on good. But it's all about managing expectations, also building it into your contract so the patients know what's expected of them. I have a really good video on breakage of brackets, and that includes molar brackets. Um, if they break, normally in my contract or in my agreement, I'm telling the patients if it breaks within the first 24 hours, that's on me. Something happened, it got a little bit wet, the glue didn't quite cure correctly. It's a very complex series of chemical interactions to stick a bracket to a tooth. Unlike a band, which is just mostly on there for retention and a little glue just to fill in the gaps, this is, biochemical reaction and things can go wrong with them. It's rare, but it can. So if it breaks in the first 24 hours, you give me that phone call within 24 hours, it does not count towards your broken brackets. If it breaks beyond 24 hours, it's on you. It counts towards your 24-hour brackets, unless, and I don't necessarily tell the patients that, but obviously you need to be very careful. If it's happening on the bottom, you need to make sure it's not their bite. That's on you too. So obviously using bite bumps, using bite turbos, using bite plates when needed, not bonding the lower until you're sure. But for upper brackets, for sure. And usually if there's an issue with the glue or the etch process or the isolation, it's not just one bracket, it's many brackets. Like the whole thing starts to fall off. It happens. It happens. So in any case, um, managing expectations, putting it into your contract, taking the time to explain foods to the patient. This is the most important part. You can't just hand them a handout and say, don't eat this. It's not as much about what they can't eat, it's how they eat it. And it's a completely different experience. Normally, kids are just biting, shoveling food in their mouth. They can't eat like that. And there are some kids that manage to get away with it and not break brackets, but for the vast majority, you have to follow the rules, which means, yeah, if you have a pizza, you can't, maybe you can eat the cheesy part, but you can't bite the crust. You might, if you really want crust, rip off tiny little pieces, throw it into the back of your mouth and chew it. Same thing with sandwiches. Can't bite into the sandwich unless it's like a mushy sandwich, on mushy bread, without a bunch of vegetables and things like that in it. So it's really, really different. So managing that, having the right paperwork, having the right contract, coming up with the right actionable plan for when things do break, what to do, making sure they know what to do, making sure they have the resources to get pokey wires clipped, or they can manage them at home when things like that happen, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, you're gonna have a few more brackets if you do brackets, but normally I tell the patients that if they chronically are breaking back teeth brackets, they're gonna get bands. Okay, well then you did everything you could do at that point. After 1-2 times of breaking a molar bracket, then they get bands. The problem with the bands is, first of all, you're gonna have to put the darn spacer in first for about a week, so it's an additional appointment, additional chair time. Then bands are a lot more expensive than brackets. You're gonna have to fit the band. If you aren't And stocking a whole tray of bands in a zillion different sizes is very, very expensive. I mean, it's very expensive. It's going to add a lot of money to your practice. Now, if you are a general or pediatric dentist and you don't want to stock everything, you can have most ortho labs will fit bands for you. All you have to do is take a scan. You don't have to put the spacer in before the scan. They can fit it for you virtually and send it back to you. So that's what I would recommend, unless you're just doing a ridiculous amount of ortho, and then you can buy your own kit of brackets. But it also takes time to fit bands, you know? You gotta try it. It's like trying on shoes. Try it on, try the next size on. I mean, you're talking a band appointment with the spacer, you're wasting good 45 minutes to an hour of chair time. Not doctor necessarily chair time, depending on your state, but staff chair time. But bracket takes no chair time to fit. So I'm just talking about the negatives. People like to think, oh, well, it's going to save me on headaches. Now, let's talk about patient comfort. These are not comfortable. I've had them. They're not comfortable. And they're not good for your gums because they go below the gums. There's a lot of bacteria that gets in there. Gums are generally quite inflamed. Studies show that over time, I mean, unless the patient has perfect hygiene, they're probably going to have more tissue breakdown, more issues if you have a band rather than a bracket. So it's not my go-to step to put bands on unless the patient has chronic issues with breakage. That's pretty much where I'm leaving it. Obviously, if you're having an appliance, it's going to have bands most likely. And then that's that, you know, but it's not something I routinely do on every single patient. So, and then the last thing that most doctors who are not orthodontists don't understand is way back when we did bands on every patient, we also didn't do Essex retainers. We did Holly retainers. Holly retainers allow band spaces to close. Or we did bonded retainers and a Holly over it. There was really no Essex retainer, not routinely. You can't do Essex retainers if you're going to do bands. You can't, because you're going to preserve the band space. There's a small space that you created that has to be closed up. How are you going to close it, right? This is the most important thing. You're creating a perio food trap if you go from bands to Essex. So now you're going to have to do a different retainer. Well, this patient may not want a Holly retainer. So basically, if you're going to do bands, you have to think about how you can close that band space. And if you're going to do bands, are you going to do a Holly retainer? Is your patient going to wear a Holly retainer? Because nowadays, very few patients are cool with wearing a Holly retainer. If you don't wear the Holly retainer 24/7 for 3 to 6 months, the teeth will move. And unlike with an Essex, where it will move back, they won't. And how is that going to work in your contract when things move within the first few weeks? Because that's pretty much on you. So with relapse. So again, you're really opening up a huge can of worms by putting on bands unless you're covering all your bases ahead of time with the patient. So think about these things and how you're going to do it. Sure, you can do a bonded retainer, let things settle. You can do a positioner. There's a lot of things you can do, but these are all old school things that we did, you know, to try to remove band spaces. But no, you can't go from debond to an Essex same day. You can't scan and go straight to the Essex. So you need to think about how you're going to do it. It's going to end up costing you a lot more money and time and headaches down the road, going from one retainer to the next, additional appointments, closing the band space, than it is just working with your patient to work on compliance. And to be really honest, if your patient is chronically non-compliant with foods, why are you doing ortho on them anyways? Like, you need to manage that. Sometimes you just have to take the braces off and be like, we're done. You know, and you have the right to do that if they're chronically breaking. That's called non-compliance, and that should be in your contract. And how that works. No, the patient may not be happy with you, but I've worked on easily maybe 5,000-10,000 braces cases, a lot of them, you know, with brackets and stuff. And sometimes you have to take the braces off early. That's just how it is. Or if they really are breaking stuff, you tell them they can pay the upgrade fee to switch to Invisalign. You know, they can pay that $1,900 or whatever you want to make it be. That's another option. If they're chronically breaking stuff, maybe they shouldn't have something that can be broken. That's why it's there. There's always an option. So think about it. All right. Sorry to burst people's bubbles, but hopefully this was helpful. Thanks.